So hey guys, it's Lachi Punnett on the eve of the Charlotte set review. I'm here with W Kim and no one else for once. The reason we're doing this video is because we want to tidy up our set reviews. They're becoming our main content because everyone's either got writer's block or is lazy. In my case, it's both. So what we're going to be doing is introducing a sort of rating system to make our discussion about the cards and set reviews a lot more complete. It's something similar to what a lot of other podcasts do when it comes to set reviews. They give like an A, B, C, whatever grade. I don't think Weiss is that cut and paste that you can kind of give A, B, C or whatever. So what we've done is we're going to introduce our system in a bit. But in order to do that, we're going to use Log Horizon as an example. It's a set that has a fairly defined quote-unquote meta deck, has a few nice techs we can talk about, and it has a very definitive draw to the set. Now, I noticed I've just been monologuing, but I promise W. Kim's with me. Yeah, so what we're basically going to do is we're going to talk about each of our ratings and give examples as to why they are there. So I figure we'll just go through the ratings and then we'll talk about the meta label. You reckon that's okay? Sure. All right. So first of all, our best, like the quote unquote best rating we can give a card is good. So good is a card that you actively want to play in a deck, that draws you not sorry, that you put in a deck when you write the skeleton because they have unique and powerful effects that play a role in that deck and match up well to the metagame. So examples of these would be the 0/0 Mariel support, which comes into play in Mills 3 and then top checks. If it's a climax, you go to the Mariel goes to stock. So this
It
card
mills.
is
It
just
tops mills.
sorry?
It's
Oh,
come and
it
play.
mills, does it?
It
Yeah,
come and
my
plays
bad.
mills one, and then you can it come and plays mill two. The first mill, the mill one is if it's a climax, it goes to stock. If it's not, doesn't
Yeah,
nothing
but you
happens.
you can choose the order.
Yeah. And the
But yeah,
second one
it's a
is like optional mill, and is it optional?
yeah. So I feel this card is a very strong card in the set. It gives you a global 500, which you really appreciate at all levels.
Yes.
And the fact that you go through your deck faster gets you to your second refresh quicker. I personally wouldn't play Log Horizon without at least three of this because it serves as a quote unquote free brainstorm in that it gets you to your second refresh really quickly, and it does give some decent field presence because it's a global 500.
Yeah. It's also really nice in this deck because it is sort of salvage oriented. Lock Horizon as a
Yeah.
set. Your
Yeah,
primary source
so
of advantage is going to be coming from triggering gates.
yeah, so you
So
trigger gates, and you've also got the 2/2 event, which salvages any two cards. So if you're post refresh, you can fill your waiting room with more cards in order to give yourself more targets for your 2/2 events.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'd call that a good card because it contributes to giving the field some power. It gets you through the deck quickly, so you can get compressed quicker, and it's just a decent card.
Yep.
So another good card I'd say is well, the 3/2 Akatsuki. So it's your best heal, and it is
It's
also
your only
your
heal.
it is your only heal, and it is also your best finisher.
Yeah,
Uh,
in particular, it's actually very sizable, given
mm,
that the climax combo gives power.
yeah,
You're
it requires you to reverse,
it requires a
but
reverse, which is a deficit, but you can't really be too picky in Log Horizon, so you're gonna be playing it anyways. And the
yeah,
climax slots aren't actually like an issue because you're running her gate anyways.
exactly. So it's you're not interfering with anything in terms of climax slots, and you play it because it's a heal and because it can help finish the game, both of which are really important abilities. It's also changeable, but that's less important, I feel.
Yeah, the change is not gonna happen very frequently unless for some
It's
reason you're dirtling.
Yeah, it's climax based change. It's a climax based change, so it's very expensive, and you need to have the climax as well if you want to also get the ping. But you do at least get a heal. I don't know. I wouldn't change into it too often, but that doesn't stop it from being a very good card.
Yes.
So other good cards, say the 2/1 refresh counter, the Akatsuki counter. It's you pay two when you use the counter, and you get to refresh your deck and waiting room without taking damage.
Free
So
refreshing has historically always been like a really strong effect.
yeah. Especially if you're using it to also overpower something, which might not always be the case, but it is the case enough at the time to warrant it being a good card that you put at least one of in the deck so you can have access to it. Like Angel Beats has faded out, um, but this effect has traditionally been very strong because you're basically paying the extra two to heal, and also you pay the extra one to get some power. So you might not always get full value out of it, just like you might not always get full value out of a Katsuki, but it is still a really good card.
Yeah. In addition, there's always just the fact that like if you are in like awkward climax situations, this is an okay way to get out of that as well.
Yeah, so these are some examples of good cards, and now there are a couple more contentious examples of good cards. So the Shiroi Brainstormer is a 0/0. The front middle row gets 1,000 on the opponent's turn, and it's a tap Brainstorm. For every climax, you draw one. So this is a good card in Log Horizon, but in the context of brainstorms in general, it's very mediocre.
Yeah, in particular, you would see it compared to cards like, I guess the best example these days would be the Aaron back row from Attack on Titan.
Yeah, that's just a tap one, yeah.
It's also a tap one. However, unlike Shiroi, Aaron searches, and then he also gets 1,000 power to the center slot on your turn, which
Yeah,
is
on your
large.
opponent's turn.
No, Aaron's on your turn,
Oh, my bad. Yep, yep, yep.
which is often considered to be a better effect because most sets are more concerned with killing things on their own turn than walling on opponents' turns.
Yep. But Log Horizon definitely appreciates the extra power on the opponent's turn. And also, this is just the only brainstorm that you really want to run. It's a
Pretty sure
because
it's the
this
only brainstorm
brainstorm
in the
is
set, like
yeah,
actual brainstorm.
this brainstorm's not spammable, but at least it's a form of advantage. And the reason the Marielle we talked about earlier is so good, part of it's because the brainstorm is kind of average. But even an average brainstorm will qualify as a good card. So our ratings will all be in the context of just the set, not the entire meta. Otherwise, we'd have to give bad ratings to like every card ever.
But our set review, our overall score for the set, will be based on its position in the
Yeah.
actual meta.
So we'll be talking about after we're finished reviewing cards, we will be talking about the set as a whole. Don't think we won't. But when we give cards individual ratings, they will all be in the context of the set, and that's why we can say that this Shirei Brainstorm is actually quite good.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can just move on to our next rating.
Yep. So our next rating is playable. A step down from good. These are all cards that are basically the filler cards, the cards that you're just using to fill up the space. They're usually just like solid enough cards. They're on trait, and they get the job done. They're not
Yeah,
like
so
outstanding, and they're not like necessarily the best card
mm,
ever, but they're all able to do something that makes them worth having.
yeah, so these cards are just like they're the cards you play so you can get to your good cards, or they're the cards that you play because you only have so many
Good
really good
cards.
cards in your set and you need to make up 50. A lot of these cards will be good by their own merits, but that they aren't actively drawing you to play them. So you don't start your deck list with these cards. Well, you might, but I wouldn't. But these cards are good and they will be included. They will see play because they are all solid cards that warrant playing.
Yeah,
They
the
are
the
not
only
they are not super good.
the only strike against playable cards as opposed to good cards is that playable cards are rarely the cards you're going to say this won me this game. I
Yeah.
think
So there will always be points where one of these cards, quote unquote, wins you the game. But if you think about it a little harder, it probably wasn't that card.
yeah,
So a few examples that we've got listed. The 0/0 Soijiro, it's a 0/025, and on your opponent's turn, if they have three or less other characters, it gains 2k to become a 4/5. So it's a sizable level 0 body. It's not much of a beater, but it's very difficult to beat over unless your opponent has a 2k1 soul or they have a bomb
or a full field.
or a full field, in which case it's only a 2/5. But this card is very serviceable, and Log Horizon players will know it as one of the best cards you can just throw down on turn one because it forces an answer.
Yeah, it's just going to be very frustrating for a lot of sets to deal with.
Mm.
And in general, like almost all oversized beaters and level zero utility level zero cards that are more intended to just sit there are going to generally be in this playable category unless they're
Yeah.
outclassed by something else in the set.
I think the exception might be runners and Ricky clones because those
Yeah.
cards are just
When you get to
so
the
good.
utility cards, that's when you look at
Yeah.
the ones that are
Those
good.
cards, but those cards are just so good early on that you can think about them as good and not just filler.
Yeah.
Whereas cards like this are like average. If the set had a runner, then you probably wouldn't play Soichiro. Because after the initial few turns, this card is basically a 0/0 blue 2/5 that you put in your level zone if you can.
Yep.
It's playable, but it doesn't have much of a role later, which is why we put it here. Um, so
Let's
our
see.
next example is the 1/1 Clock Encore Akatsuki. So this might be a little contentious because the card is good and you do sit on it for a long time, so it does appear as if it's like supporting your entire game plan. But in reality, it's not that great. It's just a 1/1 Clock Encore. Maybe it goes up to 7k. You've got two Mariel supports. On your turn, it does get really big because if another magic character attacks, then it gains 1k. Magical weapon,
No,
sorry.
it's not. It's not when it attacks. You can tap a character to give it 1,000.
Oh, my bad, my bad. That makes it even less good than I thought it
Yeah,
was.
it's still playable. It's very playable in the set.
Yeah. Okay.
It's functionally going to be taking a similar slot to the 1/0 Clock on Corsairoi, which is also playable, but these are both kind of contentious in the sense that like the Akatsuki is 6k on opponent's turn,
Mm,
depending on your back row, so it could go up to 7k on opponent's turn. In some cases, that's enough to wall. Some
yeah.
decks can't kill 7k, and those are
Like
the ones that'll
if your
struggle.
back row is if your back row is two Mariels, then sure, you're a 9k every single time you attack. But that's only one row. Like the other rows aren't going to be buffed. And that's problematic. It means you don't want to play a whole bunch of these because they're just not going to be very big on your turn.
Yeah. And then in the same vein, you have the Shiroi, the 1/0 Shiroi, which is 5/5 if you have four or more in
I
hand, I believe.
I think it's five or more, but
It's some number of
no, no,
cards in hand.
it's four or more because Liz is five or more, and I remember this being one less than Liz.
Yeah, and like it's a solid enough card on its own, but you ultimately what you'll find is like it's still too small in a lot of circumstances. So like
Yeah.
these cards are all playable. They will go into your deck. They will get you to your next point,
Mm.
but you won't necessarily say these are the game-winning cards for you.
Yeah, pretty much. So they're like curve fillers that you will play because you need them. And yeah, that's all you can really say about this card. I know there'll probably be someone out there who will complain and say, this card was amazing for me. It carried me the whole game. I never needed to clock aside from taking this clock encore. Sure, that happened, but it it's not a draw to the set. It's not an actively good card. All it is a 1/1 kind of big clock encore that you need because it gets you to your late game.
Yep. And one last example for playable. There are obviously more cards than the ones we're talking about here because this isn't a
Yeah.
full set review. Would be
Yes.
a card like the 1/0 Nyanta. This is like super duper debatable, but
I don't think so. I think it's fine.
I
It
like
does
this
give
card a
you.
lot.
Mm,
In a sense, it lets you run a little bit more questionable level 1 choices. It also makes your level 1 bombs a lot more effective. That is one of the draws to the set. It was one of the earlier sets with a level 1 bomb, if I remember properly.
yes.
It makes you able to recurse those level 1 bombs, which are always
Recurve, yeah, which is really good.
good. And the secondary effect actually comes in handy in a lot of circumstances where you want to take less damage, you know your opponent's lacking on reverse effects, and therefore you're basically free to side attack at level 3 and get some extra damage in without potentially risking something on your opponent's turn.
Pretty much. Like it's a good way to recycle cards, especially cards that are better on your turn. And Log Horizon does have a few good costless cards which do that. Like you can even recycle your 0/0 Mariels or whatever to mill some more. Like these cards, this card has a lot of good function, but in the end, it's just utility. It's not going to push you towards winning the game or get you enormous amounts of value that mean you don't ever have to clock again. But it is a very serviceable card that you will probably play in your deck.
Yeah. It does do a lot, but it ultimately isn't like doing game ending damage most of the time
Mm,
or massive advantage generation that like and this
mm,
is super outdated now, but like Shimakaze effects used to get you.
yeah. So the other thing that you should know about playable cards, as in this category of this rating we give, is that these cards aren't absolute fixtures in a deck. So good cards will basically always be in that series meta list, or the meta deck that we're talking about. But the playable cards have alternatives, or they're not so good as to always warrant inclusion. Like Soichiro has alternatives. There are 3/5s that can take his place. I personally wouldn't play them, but they can take his place. The Clock Encore Akatsuki has a 1/1 bondable Naotsugu, which is really fat, and it has the 1/0 Shiroe Clock Encore. And Nyanta is just utility. Like you can play him, but he won't be a super huge draw to the set. So that's our playable. That's our playable grade.
All of those cards, for instance, are in fact playable. It's just these are
Yes.
the examples we're choosing to focus on for this video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our next label is actually a bit of a contentious one. It's the niche label. So when I say niche, I don't mean this card is only for a waifu deck, although in some cases that is what the card is for. What I refer to when I say niche, or what we refer to, is that these cards need a little more to make them work. Like they have potentially strong effects. They might be good against your particular meta. They might be good against certain decks, but these cards need you to work around them a little, and because of that, we can't give them as high a grade as premium splashables or cards that draw you into the set.
In a sense, these are cards that either take a lot more commitment to use, or they're only very specific circumstances where they're actually useful.
Yeah, like I would actually say this is a subset of the playable category, but they take up a lot more space or a lot more room or force you to play a different play style that you might not be used to. It forces you to do something different rather than just jamming cards and always getting value out of them, which is why we separated it completely.
Yeah. So our first
Yeah, so
example.
examples, there's a 0/0 Leneissia. Not many people know this card exists, but what it does is at any point you can tap two characters to look at the top card of your deck and put it on the top or bottom. That's a pretty strong effect that you can if you can just activate it at any time. The other ability is when one of your characters dies, you can sack this card to put that character back rested. So that's a useful effect if you if you frequently have bombs left over, or you're playing like the 1/1 Naotsugu, or other cards which get bigger on your turn. But the problem is this card you need to have two cards to tap, which means it interferes with the 1/1 Clock Encore Katsuki. It interferes with your brainstorm, so you can't brainstorm and tap this without losing out on some amount of value. And yeah, it uses up the resource known as standing characters for an effect you might not necessarily value over brainstorming. Although the effect is really powerful, it does require you to make sacrifices, which is why we chucked it in here, even though I'm very biased towards this card.
It's a very good. There are situations where this card will do a lot of work, but in the same sense, the first effect is very similar to what Nyanta does. The Leneissia is better when you're bouncing, in particular, costed characters, because then you just save it instead of bouncing it back to your hand, which means you have to pay for it a second time. But in a lot of circumstances, this card really just doesn't do anything for you, or you just can't use the effect because you need to use the Brainstormer, for instance.
Exactly. So you might think, oh, this card you can top check for your Marielle to make sure she doesn't go to stock. Well, that implies you're tapping two characters, and then Marielle will come down and probably be in the front row. So that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, in
There are a
reality,
lot.
the Mariel is very unlikely to miss on that first mill anyways. If it happens, it's not even game-ending damage.
Yeah, so this is a card that I would classify as niche because it's very good, but you need to make some sacrifices.
Yeah.
So the next one I think we'll talk about is the 1/1 event counter, Mind Shock.
Yes.
So it's a 1/1 3/5 counter that's blue, and it gives power 3/5 power to any magic or weapon trait. So this card is fine. Like it's a super specific card you play in order to stop your characters from dying. Um, I wouldn't call it the mainstay in a Log Horizon deck.
Now, this is one of those cards you're more inclined to run if you're using the bodyguard, for instance.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Because what you'll
Bodyguard
find is
or
the rest of your cards are actually like too small a lot of the time for this to matter.
yeah, like you basically play Naotsugu, which is a 7/5/1/1, and you play the Brainstorm, and these cards are big enough to actually get a lot of value out of a 3/5 power. 3/5 power counter, sorry. And you need to play these cards in order to give this card any value, because while countering a 1/1 Akatsuki Clock Encore is nice, it's not necessarily what you need it to do, because one, it is Clock Encore anyway, and two, sometimes opponents get so big that even 3/5 won't get you. Like, it'll get you to 10k, sure, but on multiple rows, your opponent might be too big on multiple rows for the 3/5 counter to matter, which can be an issue. I
Yeah.
mean, you might think I'm joking, but recently they've printed a lot of high power cards on your turn.
Yes.
So yeah,
And then
we can talk about the Toya the twins combo, I
yeah, so
guess.
it's Toyo Minori stuff. It's pretty much shenanigans.
Yeah, like it's actually all right once you have everything on the field. You need to use a lot of stock to get it all there. But once you do, you have a bunch of really, really big characters.
Yeah,
And
they're
yeah,
just very large. So, for instance, this is the Minori. It gives characters with Toya in the name, the two characters with Toya in the name, 1,000 power.
yeah,
And then on opponent's turn, all your characters get 1,000 power. So, theoretically, each one's a global 2,000 power on opponent's turn. So,
yes. But the issue is that these cards are all costed. They're all 1/1s.
yeah. So it ends up costing you almost too much to actually play.
Yeah, like you need to have a lot of them on the field, and at that point, you used up so much stock, and you've got such a risky field that I don't know if it's worth it. I'm not entirely sure that this card is actually in the niche category. I would probably put it in the bad category because I just don't think it's a very good card with a high ceiling. But you can make it work against a lot of decks, and for that reason, I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt.
Ironically, this combo is absolutely shredded by Isuzu, which is also in this set.
Funnily enough, yes.
It does not have a good time
So
when it's facing
yeah,
that down.
so bombs and bounce counters do quite a number on this, but it's still a really big field that forces your opponent to commit a lot to fight it. So I'm willing to say it's a niche card as opposed to
Just straight up
being
bad.
worse. Yeah, and the last one we've got listed here is a Rundle House 2/2. So this card is actually not that bad. It's a where is it?
It's very
It's a
amusing.
2/2/7/5,
Uh,
and
yep, it gets 500
um
for every other avatar or net character, I believe,
weapon or magic.
weapon or magic.
This
Yeah,
is SAO, but they've got different traits.
yeah.
So basically, it's an oversized 2/2. It's 9/5 with a full field, which is fine. Like it's possibly a better level 2 play than anything else in the set. But its other ability, which isn't actually a downside to be honest, it's pay 3, discard 2 cards. Ooh. When this attacks, you may pay the cost. If you do, deal 5 damage.
Yep, it's very amusing. I
Yeah,
believe the last Log Horizon list to top anywhere was like an Italian list that ran this card.
yeah. This
Uh,
card is a perfectly serviceable finisher, but the main issue with it is that you're using so much stock. Just playing it, paying 2 stock. That's like a Shiraway level 3 or a Akatsuki level 3 that you could be playing. That's the main problem with this. The secondary effect is great, but if you wait just a little longer, you can use that 2 stock on something better.
yeah, and then you also run into the issue where burn 5 is a pretty unreliable number, to say the
Yeah.
least.
I've got a lot of disdain for like Pumpkin, and I that continues with this card. I just don't think it's a very reliable finisher at all.
But that said, it's still there are games where you'll if you have this in your deck, you might again it's a niche card, therefore it's completely optional to have. But if you do end up like playing this card, it can just outright win you a game. There are circumstances where this card stands out, and in those
Mhm.
circumstances, you'll be glad to have it. And that's one of the category. That's one of the standing out points for niche as well. Sometimes they're just cards that you really just were glad to see.
Yeah, pretty much. So these are cards that you just need to put a little more work into, but they are serviceable when they get there, though it's questionable as to whether you would play them over anything else.
Yeah, they're not so much staples, but they're
They're not even close to staple.
no.
They're just cards that might be playstyle dependent or require a different deck show entirely.
And in bad, bad
Yeah,
is
we just
our
this is our last rating. Just bad cards. Bad cards aren't necessarily unplayable because in Weiss, very few cards are actually unplayable. They all beat for 1 soul or they have some sort of relatively okay effect. Bad cards are cards that are either outclassed in the vast majority of situations, like maybe not literally every situation, but so many situations that it's just better to play than any alternatives. And then you have just actively bad cards which contribute to you losing. So there are very few of these cards, and they're usually from older sets, but
They're usually from Persona.
yeah, they're usually from Persona, correct? And we'll come across them now or then, but I don't think we actually have an example in this set. We only have cards which are not particularly good or outclassed by other equivalent plays.
Yeah, so in general, for instance, in this deck, almost all the vanillas are outclassed by some
Yeah.
other card.
So
There's like,
this is not a global all vanillas are bad declaration. This is just in log horizon. The vanillas are not great because you have better
yeah,
options.
they're just not contributing anything, like as opposed to, for instance, apples.
Yeah, more or less. Like there are good vanillas. Like a lot of sets use vanillas because they're the best costless option you have. For example, um, I don't know, the Tulavru animal build or Melty Blood. Like these are sets that use vanillas because the vanillas are good.
And then like
But
another example is this 00 Henrietta, which is largely outclassed by the 00 Soichiro.
yeah, so it's a 0035, which is actually fine. Like a 3/5 beater on your turn is okay. I know that Soichiro and this card aren't initially comparable because Soichiro doesn't really beat over things, whereas this card can. But they serve the same overall purpose in that they're just an oversized card that your opponent wants to get over. And not only that, but even though Soichiro does not take this card's place, you do have level 0 bombs, which do take this card's place in getting rid of somewhat big level zeros. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a card that's outclassed by a single other card. It can be a card which is outclassed by a lineup you are going to play anyway, and therefore doesn't have much function to begin with.
Yep.
Or in the end, doesn't have much function in the end. So this card, for reference, is a 3/5 that when it comes to play, if you don't have another magic character, you have to sack it. So yeah.
So basically, in addition to the individual card ratings, our usual set reviews are still going to be going over every card. That's not so much changing. They're just going to be more structured, and we're going to have a better idea of what we're looking at as we're going through the set to make it
Mm.
less confusing for people to listen to.
Pretty much. So we're actually going to, when we go over a card, we will give it a rating in the end. Like I'll get everyone on the show to give it a rating, and we can agree, we can disagree, but that'll just fuel discussion and it'll be more structured. Other bad card, like there is an example of just a purely outclassed card in this set, and it's not entirely obvious. It's the 1015 Mariel counter.
Yeah, I believe
So
there is a 2K counter in this set that's a promo.
yeah, it's a promo, so it's not necessarily obvious to everybody, but it does exist. I'll confirm it exists, just so we don't look stupid. It's the Minori, right?
It should be the Minori. It should be a 101K counter that gives another 1,000 if you control a character with Shiroi.
Yes, I think that's yes, it does exist. So it's a one. So the Shiroi you're going to have is probably the Brainstorm, which means that the Minori card is going to, in maybe 80 to 90% of circumstances, be outright better than the 1/0 Mario counter.
Yeah. So,
Because you will probably have a Shiroi, like a support of some sort by level 1.
yep. And if you don't, it's just poor luck or something horrible happened.
Hmm.
So, yep, that's basically going to be the new rating system that we're going to be using for the cards. It should make it a lot easier to follow.
Yep, so just once more, we've got good, playable, niche, and bad ratings. And we've got one more thing to cover, actually. We've got a special label, like the special snowflake label that we only give to maybe 1 to 3 cards in any given set. So this is what we're going to call the meta label. This
The reason why you're
demarcates
playing the set.
exactly. These are the cards which draw you to the set. Now, these cards may not necessarily be amazing, but they are powerful and unique and supported by a good enough shell to make you play the set. So the example in Log Horizon is, if you hadn't figured it out, level 3 Shiroi because it's an anti-burn. It gives a massive amount of power that helps you stand against clock kicks and restands, and it even has an additional minus soul ability. So in this case, the card that draws you to the set is actually really good, but it's also really unique, and it's the reason that you're playing this set. You're not playing this set for like yeah, no problem. You're not playing this set for the Akatsuki level 3. You're not playing it because you've got a global support that mills, and you're definitely not playing it because you have the Shiroi Brainstorm. You're playing it because you have Shiroi level 3,
Yeah.
and he's an option available to you when you play this set. That is why you play him.
Yeah, that is actually why
Yeah.
you play this set. If you are from a purely competitive standpoint.
Yeah, so if you hadn't figured it out, we talk about meta things and competitive things. We don't really delve into the waifu scene because if we do, then literally any deck, any card is serviceable to some degree. We're talking purely competitive. If you were to pick a deck to go into a tournament tomorrow for the chance to win $100 million, why would you play this deck? And that is why, because Shiroi.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, the reasons why you play this deck do not necessarily reflect its positioning in the overall meta.
Yeah, exactly. So even though Log Horizon has this good card, I don't actually think it's as good as Shana when it comes to anti-burn, and probably not as good as Charlotte when it comes to anti-burn. Although Charlotte is mutual anti-burn, which is it docks points.
It's unique, but like every set will have their draw cards. For Nisekoi, it was Marika. For True Lover, it's the level 3 Yami. For Charlotte, for instance, it will be the 0/0 anti-burn probably.
Yeah, pretty much.
So like every set has like a couple of cards that like scream, "This is so good, I need to use it."
Yeah, like these cards may not necessarily get a good rating in our system. Like, for example, Shana. Shana's draw cards are, well, the only real draw card is the 1/1 anti-burn Yuji. But that card by itself isn't actually that good. And against some matchups, it's completely worthless. I wouldn't be sure, I wouldn't necessarily call it a good card in our rating scale. I would just call it a
It would
playable
be
to
playable
above
to
average.
niche
Yeah, like
in the in the system.
ex exactly. But it's still the meta card that draws you to the set. So this is a completely distinct rating from our good, playable, niche, bad system. And it's basically pointing out the important card that draws you to the set.
So that is like the plan for all future set reviews. It
Yep.
does mean that we're actually going to be doing some real work when we're planning out our set reviews,
Yeah.
as opposed to just waking up our dear friend on the moon early in the morning and
Yeah.
just having him say go.
Up till now, I've actually woken up at 7:30 or 8 and then just literally gotten on my computer and done a cast with no pre-reading, no show notes, no planning. That's all going to change because this is becoming our mainstay content. And I do believe there are people who like the content. So I'm just going to we're going to keep improving. We're going to keep listening to feedback, and we will hopefully make these more enjoyable, more structured, and uh, maybe slightly less meme filled than before.
Something about Log Horizon not having green, therefore can't be top tier.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do enjoy our casual banter style, and rest assured, we will have that. We will have that in the actual discussion of cards, but we will be making it a lot more structured, and we might actually just write up a table of all of our ratings if we can be bothered, and then you'll have that for reference.
Yep. So hope this video is helpful for people trying to figure out what our new rating system will be.
Yep.
Beyond that, it should be pretty clear, even in the videos, that we're now using a very structured system for
Yep.
determining card quality.
So rest assured, we're doing all this because that makes it easier for everyone else to understand. Even I have trouble listening to our videos now and then, and I love the sound of my own voice. So if I have trouble with it, I'm sure everyone else has trouble. And hopefully this will make it a lot easier. I don't actually love the sound of my own voice, it's just a joke. So yeah, I I hope that you continue to enjoy any set reviews, or that you begin enjoying the set reviews if you haven't been enjoying them already, because we're going to be trying to make them a lot more easy on the ears for everybody.
Yep. next up is going to be the Charlotte set review. That's going to be the first set review, full set review, using this system. Hopefully, we don't end up padding the runtime
Oh, I think it will pad the runtime,
an
but that's
extraordinary amount compared to what we already have.
like limited resources goes for like 6 hours or something stupid like that.
So
So
we will
I'm
still
sure
have the summary videos, which we've been doing as well.
exactly. And in those summary videos, now that we have a structure, we can literally cover all of the cards that we've marked as meta and good.
Yep.
So those will be padded out a little more as well, but again, that will hopefully be a good thing for everyone listening and for us as well.
All right. Thanks for watching.